This is the Integrated Content-Based Method of Instruction by Group 1.
You may be wondering, why should I use the content-based method of instruction in my CLD classroom? And what is it? Well, I'll explain to you so many benefits of using content-based instruction, but first, allow me to define it for you. When students are learning a new language, they tend to learn the language faster when it's taught through meaningful contexts. All students need cognitively complex content to communicate with others about authentic topics, while cultivating skills in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. When CLD students are problem-solving and discovering new content with their classmates in an interactive classroom, it provides a meaningful context for more language development and use. Content-based instruction allows for greater cognitive demands, and it enables students to store meaningful facts and skills in their memory with less time required for practicing and rehearsing. That results in better internalization of the language and processing. Students can make concrete connections to their own background knowledge and prepare to transfer skills from their language 1 to their language 2. Social interaction in L2 and scaffolding by the teacher enable contextualization and comprehension of their new language. Repeated exposure to new vocabulary words eliminates the artificial separation of language and content knowledge. Content-based instruction ensures that there is developmentally appropriate content material for CLD students. It also allows the whole community, students, teachers, and all members of the school alike, to ensure each student's comprehension of the content material and language. Content-based instruction is better than a simple pull-out and language-based instruction because it uses multiple meaningful interactions and higher-order thinking. It encourages information gathering skills, organizing skills, analyzing skills, and generating skills, which are all necessary for CLD students to learn their L2 in a meaningful way.
The integration of language and content-based learning is perceived as an excellent way of making progress in L2 acquisition. Content-based instruction increases students' SLA. Its origins began with the WAC, or Writing Across Curriculum, movement in the 1980s. WAC used writing as a central learning tool in all learning subjects. This movement was followed by the Language Across the Curriculum theory, commonly known as LAC. This idea supports students and opportunities to use their skills in L1 within educational settings. It infuses and encourages L2 in all learning situations. English for Specific Purposes, or ESP, and Language for Specific Purposes, LSP, set their learner in a specific environment and teach them the language they need to know. This instruction focuses on a targeted area. Also, immersion instruction uses methodologies to ensure that the instructional language is understood by the learner. It was found that this model was best for whole class foreign language learning.
Hello, I'm going to talk to you about the planning process using the Integrated Content-Based Method of Instruction, or the ICB method. As a 7th and 8th grade ELA teacher, this is how I plan all of my units. So as I go through this process, I'm going to explain to you a cross-curricular ELA and social studies unit that I taught my students recently, which is a book club unit that the students really enjoyed. Step 1 of the process is to choose a theme. Your theme provides a framework on which the teacher can map out and identify the needs of the students within the classroom. It also provides a vision for the unit. The theme that I chose was cultural diversity, as I knew that this was something that would increase student engagement and motivation, as many of my students are interested in this topic. The next step is to select topics that will be taught within your theme. The topics must reflect the theme, as well as the linguistic, cultural, cognitive, and academic needs of your students. Your topic should also engage students and help motivate and increase interest. The topics that I chose for this unit were racism, privilege, and advantage and disadvantages, as these are big topics happening in society and things that I knew my students were passionate about. Step 3 is to identify the language objectives for your unit. The language objective should maximize student language acquisition and academic development. The language objectives that I chose for this unit were to define what privilege is, as well as identify different types of privilege seen in society, as well as define racism and how racism is played out in history, our society today. Step 4 is to set your content objectives for your unit. Your content objectives serve a similar purpose as your language objectives, but these objectives should reflect the content that is going to be assessed throughout the unit. Because this unit was a heavy focus on ELA, I chose ELA content objectives to assess my students on. The first content objective was being able to make connections between fiction and nonfiction pieces of writing, as well as connect what they're reading to society. The second content objective was to be able to identify the main idea and theme of a story, provide an objective summary of the story, as well as identify the plot structure of a story. Step 5 is selecting appropriate materials that relate to your theme. When selecting materials, you should take into consideration student interests, the difficulty and level of the text that you are choosing, the accessibility of the text, and the availability, and then the flexibility of that text, meaning, does the text allow for the integration of multiple skills and activities? On my screen, you can see the different types of books that I chose for my unit. Each of these books works nicely for pairing with nonfiction pieces of writing, as well as making connections to society and cultural diversity. These texts are also at a variety of different reading levels and student interests. Step 6 focuses on arranging the classroom environment. When arranging your classroom environment, you want to have several different seating styles or arrangements, which allow students to work independently or with small groups, which you can see I have tables in my classroom as well as desks, which would allow both. You also want to have visuals posted around your room that relate to your theme or your content and language objectives. As you can see, I have posters hanging in my room that meet the needs of both the language and content objectives in our unit. Lastly, you want to make sure that students know that this is a safe environment where they are open to share their thoughts and be respectful of each other. And that is how you can plan a multicultural or cross-curricular ELA and social studies unit using the ICB method. After planning your unit using the ICB method, it's time to instruct your students. Step 1 of the instruction process includes selecting and pre-teaching any vocabulary to help with student understanding, and then revisit it throughout the unit. Next to the one on this slide, you'll notice one of the vocab terms that was taught during this unit, which was able-bodied privilege. Other terms included defining privilege, racism, and different types of privileges seen in society. Step 2 is building background knowledge of students. Teachers should guide students to make connections between content and their past experiences. Next to the number 2 on this slide, you'll see a synthesizing and schema writing prompt that students completed during the unit. This prompt asked students to think about what they already knew about the topic cultural diversity, plus what they have learned throughout the unit, and to create new understandings, building connections between prior knowledge and new learnings. Steps 3 and 4 focus on collaborative learning and authentic activities. Students learn best with social interactions and should work with others. Students should also engage in authentic activities that focus on reading, writing, speaking, and listening. As you can see on this slide, you'll see a couple of pictures of students working together to collaborate on new learning and having discussions about their books. You'll also notice that students have read articles, which can be seen on number 1. They completed writing prompts, which can be seen next to number 2. And they cut and glued connections, which can be seen under number 4. meaning that students engaged in several different types of activities, including reading, writing, speaking, and listening.
Assessment in the content-based model is useful in 3 important ways. It provides information regarding lesson effectiveness, information about the development of conceptual understandings for all students, and information about the language acquisition for English learners. There are 2 main types of assessment. Formative assessment enables teachers to detect misconceptions before they become too ingrained in students' ideas. Summative assessments collect evidence to determine how well students obtained the lesson's objectives. Formative assessments should be ongoing and regular. They should include 3 major aspects. First, they should adjust and modify instruction as needed when teachers see that students are confused. Second, a teacher should provide continuous feedback that is specific, constructive, and thorough. It's good to choose one aspect in order to not overwhelm a student for feedback. It's also good to discuss tips which can help students improve their understanding and to pose constructive questions to help them construct their own understanding. Additionally, teachers need to check their own instruction to make sure it aligns with the class objectives. Summative assessment, on the other hand, is collected at the end of a unit in order to collect evidence of both language and content development. To do this well, teachers should define the level of acceptable language production for a student's second language proficiency, and also avoid confusing limited language proficiency with a lack of conceptual understanding. Rubrics are useful tools. One way to make them more powerful is to have students create the rubrics together. Show different levels of exemplary, intermediate, and basic work, and have students identify what constitutes as a great product. Let this discussion lead to an assembly of defining characteristics for each ranking. When students help to define high-quality work, they're more likely to create it.